Hello, everybody. Welcome and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. I'm Alan Tanner. I head up the Digital Employee Experience team at Gallagher. I'm joined today by Brad Rook. Brad is the Senior Customer Advocacy Manager at Appspace. And Brad's going to talk today about the disconnection epidemic. And these are insights drawn from Appspace's 2026 Workplace Experience Trends and Insights report. And what we see here is employees falling out of the communications loop, a lack of consistency across communications channels, and risks arising from poor communications and disconnected workplace systems. And as we go through, we'll also make reference to data from Gallagher's 2026 Employee Communications Report. Some of you might know that as State of the Sector. Some housekeeping for you. We will send out a link to the recording and the slides after the session. There will be some poll questions as we go through today, so please do participate when these appear. We'd love to get your insight directly as we go through. And we will have time for questions and answers at the end. So please submit any questions for us in the chat and we will aim to cover those towards the end of the session. So without further ado, as I say, Brad Rook is here to talk you through the insights, and I will hand over to Brad.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan. And yeah, welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm super excited for this. Just to get things out of the way for starters, who are Appspace? Well, to give you some context, Appspace is a workplace experience platform that merges communications and workplace management into one unified source of truth. For the internal comms and HR pros here, we're talking about our intranet, our mobile app, our digital signage, essentially giving you the ability to write once and to publish everywhere. We're trusted by 170 of the Fortune 500 to keep their hybrid and frontline workforces connected every day. Okay, that's it. That's the salesy stuff out of the way, I promise. Now let's dive into why we're all actually here, which is solving the 2026 disconnection epidemic. We've only got an hour today and a lot to fit in, so looking at today's agenda, we're first going to set the scene on the disconnection crisis. Then we're going to dive into 5 key trends. Those are workplace communication failure, hybrid work gaps, technology as an advantage, information breakdowns, and the benefits of consistency. We're going to have live polls, as Alan noted, at intervals throughout our discussion, and we really encourage your participation. We're going to end our session today with some live Q&A. So getting right into things and setting the scene, we're going to look at the disconnection epidemic. Now, as Alan mentioned, the insights that we're mentioning and referring to today are built directly on our combined 2026 research, specifically Gallagher's Employee Communications Report, featuring findings from the State of the Sector survey, and Appspace's Workplace Experience Report. You're going to be able to download both of these reports from the chat a little later on in today's session. So the disconnection epidemic, we're setting the scene. It's real. It's a problem. Communication gaps are widening, and those gaps are costing organizations. 72% of employees feel out of the loop on key workplace information. 81% of employees say their organization lacks consistency across channels, and 67% of employees believe poor communications put organizational success at risk. So there are a lot of problems inherent here. These first few stats show it, and we're going to jump now into our first poll. So we can see the question here: how well does your organization currently communicate with all employees, office, remote, and frontline? Option A, very well. Option B, reasonably well. Option C, struggling. And option D, honestly, it's broken. We're going to give you just a minute there to go ahead and complete that, and then we'll bring up our results. Okay, we'll give it just another 15 seconds or so just to make sure everybody's had a chance. Great. So what we can see here is, unsurprising kind of for the format of today's webinar. We see 8.7% sitting at that very well. Most of you sitting 63.5% at reasonably well. We've got some folks who acknowledge they are struggling, and another 8.7% say, honestly, it's broken. So thanks very much for your participation in the poll. And I think we're going to present some information today that's going to be helpful and enlightening to you. Okay, so jumping to trend one, workplace communication is failing. The information gap is widening, and here's some stats in front of us that show just how much. 72% of employees felt out of the loop this past year, and 78% of employees believe their organization could do a better job sharing important information. The last stat we see here notes an 81% consistency gap, which is up from 69% last year. To be short, the gap is widening, and we need to address that. And this isn't just a technology problem, it's a strategy problem. The top 5 causes that we see are inconsistent channels, poor message timing, lack of cross-team visibility, message overload, and buried information. And Alan, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, the Gallagher report highlighted message overload as the #1 risk factor currently for communications. So in high volume communication environments, we see something like a 15% spike in the risk of employees just completely switching off through information overload. And this is actually seen as the top threat to HR and communications, is that too much information turns employees off and basically no messages land whatsoever. So the risk in just trying to broadcast to everybody and broadcast everything to everybody is very real, and that's why it's important that targeted communications are part of your strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, those targeted communications. And as you also pointed out, really realizing that not everything is necessarily important as far as things go. So thanks very much for that point, Alan. Let's turn our focus to the front lines for a second. Overall, we're seeing that frontline teams are feeling the fallout from some of these communication gaps, and they're feeling it first. From that, we're seeing some pretty meaningful trends and statistics. 37% of employees say the frontline is hit hardest when information is missed. 84% of employees say that organizations could do better at keeping them informed. And that means 84% of you need to sharpen your frontline strategy a bit. For deskless staff, information gaps cause confusion, delays, and exclusion, with 39% of employees saying their organizational communications are inconsistent, and 44% saying they're generally consistent, but they have room for improvement. What's your thoughts on that, Alan?
Yeah, well, addition to that, what we see is that if you have a primarily frontline workforce, most communications teams recognize that as a risk in achieving their communications goals. So the difficulty in being able to reach frontline workers and communicate to them effectively structurally makes it difficult. So it's in a situation where you have a primarily frontline workforce, the communications issues that we're seeing out of this reporting are actually exacerbated by the nature of that workforce itself.
Yeah, 100%. And that's so true. The limitations that frontline workforces have with things like whether or not they can even have devices on the floor, whether or not they have connectivity, there's a number of different challenges facing those folks. So great point. So let's turn our thoughts here to what needs improving as far as those communication gaps go. #1 on our list, and it's a new entry to the top 5, is delivering consistent information across all channels. #2 is, as we were talking about just now, frontline accessibility. Collaboration, regardless of location, has dropped from #1 concern last year to #3, but it's still an area that we can see is in need of improvement. #4 involves sharing updates across the entire organization, and we round out this list with #5, connecting employees around shared interests. We can see there's definitely some great areas that we need to target for our continued success. So next up, we've got a poll, and sorry, do we have a poll? Yes, we do. Pardon me. Yeah, so what do employees say that needs improving most? And we've got that: delivering consistent communication across all channels. Option B, making information accessible for frontline or mobile employees. Option C, helping employees collaborate regardless of location. Option D, sharing updates across the organization. And option E, connecting employees around shared interests. So if you could just take a second and vote on that poll, we'd like to see the results that come across there. We'll just give you 30 seconds or so to get that across. Okay, just another 10 or 15 seconds. Wonderful. So we can see, again, some interesting results here. 32% of folks saying delivering consistent communications across all channels. Number two seems to be, hang on, I got to scroll here to see if I'm not missing something. I'm not. 29% of you are saying making frontline information accessible for mobile employees. Helping employees collaborate regardless of location is in there at 13%. Sharing updates across the organization, 21%. And connecting employees around shared interests, 4%. So some really interesting feedback there. And thanks for your continued participation in the polls. So recognizing that the previous slides we've looked at have shown us some things we need to improve, here are 3 actions you can take to fix your communication now. The first thing we want to do is really collate and calibrate messages by importance. And really key here is remembering, as I said a little bit earlier, and Alan alluded to, that not everything is urgent. Not everything needs to be a right now message. The second thing we want to look at is establishing that cross-channel consistency by unifying communications into one platform that communicates across channels. So we're reaching employees where they are and based on what channels they're consuming. And then finally, we have to remember that if we're not looking at the front line as a source that we need to reach, then it's not going to work. We've got to close that deskless gap. So now moving to trend 2, we can see here on the slide, hybrid work is exposing some dangerous gaps. So what are those gaps? Here's the thing. Hybrid work is normal now, but connected hybrid work isn't. And as the stats show us here, 80% of organizations are now offering some form of hybrid work, but 55% of employees say their organization struggles to connect the physical and the digital workplace. So they're missing that inherent connection between those two ways of working. Additionally, 87% of employees are facing collaboration challenge. Overall, hybrid workers are finding difficulty connecting with their in-office counterparts and with the organization at large. So this is going to bring us to our next poll. I'm going to throw this up on screen. We'd like to hear from you. What is the single biggest hybrid work challenge in your organization right now? Option A, inconsistent communication across remote and in-person channels. Option B, employees not knowing when colleagues will be in the office. Option C, digital tools that don't work well with in-person workflows. And finally, option D, frontline workers being disconnected from office-based updates. Now, as I was talking, I'm sure you were voting. We'll give you just another 15, 20 seconds to bring that up, and then we're going to jump into the poll results.
Just while people are voting there, Brad,
Yes.
it's a general point here, which is where there's a high proportion of hybrid work taking place, in-person meetings should be valued and should be valuable. And there's a tension between being told to be in the office without that having a defined purpose. That's just presenteeism, really. You have to be here. So the challenge is to think about how to derive the maximum value when everyone is present. You know, do you have a planning session? Do you have a strategy session? Do you have something more sociable? Something like that. So you have to take a strategic approach to make the hybrid work, so that when people do come face to face, it's a different type of thing than if they're just having a conversation on Teams or whatever platform you use.
Yeah, 100%. It gets around that what's become kind of the old adage of I spend all this time commuting into the office so I can sit on a Teams meeting with a bunch of other people on Teams meeting. It's that maximizing value. Great point. So we've got our poll results up. What's the single biggest hybrid work challenge? We can see some interesting results again here. 21, almost 22% of you in inconsistent communication across remote and in-person channels. Almost 30% employees not knowing when colleagues will be in the office. We've got digital tools that don't work well with those in-person workflows at 10%. And our favorite in this case is frontline workers being disconnected from office-based updates. So obviously some of those frontline points that we've made earlier are really landing with our audience, and you're seeing those same challenges. That's really interesting to see here. So let's shift our focus to the physical for a moment, because Alan brought up some really good points along the line of maximizing that physical value that we see, not just having people in for the sake of presence. And really turning our attention to offices and space usage, we see that offices are swinging between overcrowded and empty. This is something that's happening a lot. We either have everybody in or we seem to have nobody in. Without tools to coordinate scheduling, you're basically paying for unused space. 74% of US employees and 61% of their UK counterparts, they're citing a physical and digital disconnect. 48% of UK workers are more likely to work hybrid, but they still face those coordination issues and they're missing valuable connections with their colleagues. So how do we bridge the gap between digital and physical work? Well, number one, we want to design for collaboration, and some great points on the slide here that we'll dive into. Looking at that design for collaboration, we're converting banks of desks into neighborhoods, if you will. The idea that we can put people that are working in similar job functions, teams like that, we can put them in together so they can actually meet and focus with their mentors, with their closest collaborators, things like that. We also want to look at unifying the workplace by default. We want to sync significant messages, milestones, shoutouts, announcements, things like that, all detailed on the slide here. We want to sync these across the digital and physical channels that we have. So the intranets, the digital signage, the mobile applications, we want to make sure that that's all there and consistent messaging is going out to everyone. And then finally, looking at some of the data that we have around desks being booked and how offices are being used, we can really look to right size our office space just simply based on the availability of that data, understanding why our employees are coming into the office, when they're coming in, and how we can maximize the value of them being there. Alan, did you have any other thoughts on that?
I think it's difficult to it's difficult to make a case around sort of physical reconfiguration easily. I think there needs to be a whole kind of sort of rethink of when people come into office, why they come into the office. Your physical workspace may not be that easy to configure, for instance, or you may have different offices and you may need to take different approaches across different places. So I think that's where the data around usage becomes very important. Understanding the type of patterns of use that there are, and making a proper decision based on that data-led approach, rather than maybe just some ad hoc ideas around. So I think it's really important that a fundamental change to the physical space, which comes at a cost, obviously, in terms of reconfiguration, is justified through the data that you have. So being able to look at specific usage patterns, I think, is very important for anything like that.
Excellent point. Yeah, and it's not a quick fix necessarily here, because we've got to get that data and analyze it and then make those decisions from there. So it's not just suddenly we're reducing the size of our office space or changing configurations, but if we look at the available data that we have, we can take lessons from that, and then we can start to make those subtle changes that are really going to benefit our employees in the long run as they continue in this hybrid work model. Even on the slide here, we suggest things like designated in-office days. If we know what those days are, we can start to schedule a more adequate use of space around the idea that people are going to be present in the office, and certainly take that into consideration. So great point, Alan. Thank you. This is going to bring us into trend 3, which is that connected technology is a business advantage. So Speaking of advantages, let's look at some of the advantages that this connected technology and the right tools can bring. 78% of employees say technology helps them feel connected to the overall organizational mission. 87% of those employees say a well-connected workplace is essential to realize the full value of any AI tools that are put in place. And 76% say that technology helps them understand company-wide events. So what do you think employees value most as far as this goes? Well, as we see here, there's a lot of things that they value. There's some really cool things, and certainly I think some things that you would expect. So consistency across channels, we see clocking in number one, 45%, 38% valuing that single hub access, easy access to files, to knowledge, that single source of truth that we're looking for. 31% of folks value real-time info via digital displays. We're backing up that digital presence we have with those digital displays that we can put in strategic locations, keeping people informed at a glance. 26% of folks are looking for seamless coordination across schedules, meetings, tasks across teams, and 23% looking for those personalized AI updates. So looking at these, there's a lot of great stuff here. What are some of the gaps we're seeing? What's helping us from, or pardon me, what's preventing us from realizing some of that value? And this is going to take us into our next poll. So what are some of the tech capabilities that employees value most? And we can see here we've got option A, consistent communication and content sharing across all channels and devices. Option B, easy access to files, knowledge, and company resources from that single hub, that source of truth. Option C, real-time information sharing in locations versus via digital displays or signage. Option D, seamless coordination of schedules, meetings, and tasks across teams. Or option E, AI-powered recommendations providing personalized, relevant updates. So we're going to give you a second to vote on that, and we'll take things from there. I kind of wish we had a little theme music to play while we're giving people time to vote. But anyway, just give you about 15 more seconds, and we'll jump into the poll results. Cool. So thank you again for voting. We can see that the capabilities that employee values most at 33%, consistent communication is a big concern for folks. 48%, easy access to files, knowledge. Again, that source of truth, the ability to find what we need when we need it. Real-time updates, we see it sitting at 5.2%. Seamless coordination of those schedules, the meetings, tasks across teams is at 10.4, and AI-powered recommendations is sitting at 2%. So thanks very much again for voting on that. And again, we talked about the idea of some of the gaps or what's preventing us from realizing values. And one of the big things that we see is that most organizations, as it says here on the slide, do have significant tech gaps to close. Overall, tech ratings are pretty low. Only 23% of employees say that ease of use of technology is excellent, while only 17% say their technology fosters connections within their organization. 15% say integration is excellent. These scores are virtually unchanged since last year's poll as well, or last year's report. So this really illustrates that we've got a lingering frustration with technology gaps, something that we need to address. Now, we talked a little bit about AI and made a point about AI earlier. Let's talk about it for a minute. So first off, looking at a couple of stats, as we see here, 87% of employees agree you can't bolt AI onto broken infrastructure. And this is a key point. If your communications infrastructure is broken, we can't simply put AI on top of it and expect it to fix the problems. It's really going to exacerbate those problems. So something to be very concerned about there and very aware of. Personalization is key for Gen Z and for millennials, clocking in at 27 and 25% respectively. There's some great benefits to be realized from the proper implementation of AI, but again, we need to ensure that we're proceeding correctly with that. The roadmap that we need to have is to fix the consistency in our communication channels first, and then start to gradually layer in AI. We don't want to amplify that dysfunction. Alan, did you have any thoughts on AI and kind of the implementation that we see there?
I actually got a point around personalization. So,
oh, great.
The Gallagher report highlights that only 1 in 5 organizations are actually happy with their ability to personalize channels.
Wow.
But what we think is that, what the data suggests is that actually, really effective personalization, you actually need to start thinking beyond, things like department or simple geography, in order really to drive authentic personalization down to a level where people respond to it. And trying to ally that then to a flexible use of communications formats, such as, for instance, video or a more graphic-led approach, but appropriate to the audience, and really trying to get quite sophisticated and quite granular with your personalization. And the data shows that if you can achieve that, it will significantly improve how your messages land. But it does create quite a big overhead for people in terms of being able to really set up their data correctly, which is a big challenge for communications who may not be, or HR who may not be in control of all that, how that data is coming out. But if you can get there, and the more that you can do, the greater chance you have of your messages being successful. So I think it's something that needs to be looked at significantly, is how far can you take that personalization in a practical way, because it will make an improvement for you. Just one
100%.
further point is that
Yeah.
if anyone has any questions as we go through, please can you pop them into the Q&A, and we'll try and pick them up at the end. Anyway, sorry, pass you back to you, Brian.
No, not at all, Alan. Thanks very much for that. Yeah. No, right place, right time, right person. Absolutely great point there. Thank you. So here's a few steps that you can take towards that better tech stack. We've talked about kind of some of the limitations, some of the things that we're seeing as far as stats, but how do we get towards that better tech stack? I think the first thing that we want to do here, as detailed on the slide, is we want to look for those signs that we're failing. We want to look for low engagement. We want to look for things like rising help desk requests, or maybe we're surveying our employees and we're seeing those survey results are falling. We also want to prioritize human-centric upgrades. We want to look for those solutions that can unify the physical and digital and really make them one cohesive experience. And then finally, we want to build our mission connection, but we want to also create that buy-in. We want to explain the why around some of the tools that we're bringing in, especially when it comes to things like AI. We want to make sure that we're able to communicate to our folks why we're doing this and generate that buy-in from the folks that are going to be using and benefiting from this technology.
And I think there's a key point there. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
no, you're fine. Hey, I'll jump back here. Go ahead.
No, it was just around that element of why. It's one of the issues that we see in our digital workplace engagements with people is often positioning the intranet or intranet type tools within the wider digital workplace. Sometimes people struggle to articulate that. And what that means is that employees then also are maybe uncertain about the rationale for going to a particular channel or going to a particular place. So as an adjunct to your 3 steps here, if you haven't actually sat down and said, what is the purpose of the intranet or our core comms channels or whatever it is, it can be quite a useful exercise to make you think, well, actually, how does this fit in? Because if you're struggling to interpret that, you can bet your employees are too. So answering that question maybe then helps you start to refine how you use the channel and position it in amongst this plethora of other digital workplace services that might be available.
Yeah, actually, that's such a great point, Alan, and thanks for bringing that up. That's a conversation that I've had with a lot of folks, and it really comes back to the idea, as you said, answering that question, why do these channels exist? Why are they here? And from that, we can help create that buy-in by identifying that and helping people see the intrinsic value in that. So excellent point. Thank you very much for raising that one. As I briefly alluded, we're going to jump to our next poll here. So looking at 4 options and asking the question, how integrated are your organization's communications tools today? We see option A, fully integrated, employees using one unified platform. B, partially integrated, some tools connect while others don't. C, fragmented, we use multiple disconnected tools. And D, we're just beginning to address this. I'm excited to see what the results here are going to be. Again, I don't have any theme music, but we'll give you another 15 or 20 seconds just to go ahead and answer that poll. Thank you very much as well for your participation in the polls. This is really enlightening, and I hope you're seeing some value for seeing what your cohorts on the line are thinking as well. We'll just give another 5 seconds. I'm not counting down, and we're going to jump into the poll results. So, unsurprisingly, I think a lot of you are not feeling that you're fully integrated. So we're seeing that only 10% are saying you're fully integrated, 20% partially integrated, 70% are fragmented. And then, of course, by virtue of the fact that we have no percentages left, we don't have anyone that's just beginning to address this. So we have everyone beginning to address it in some way, shape, or form. But certainly that full integration is something that's a bit of a pie in the sky for some folks right now. And certainly, again, really interesting to understand kind of where everybody's sitting as far as the polls and as far as today's subject is concerned. So this is going to bring us into trend 4, which is that information breakdowns undermine execution. So what does that mean? Well, we've talked a lot about impact and perception, but what's the cost of missing information? To organizations and their employees, that cost is huge. 97% of employees say that missing updates negatively impacts their work. 67% say that poor communications put their organizational success at risk. And collaboration as the #1 challenge has jumped from 17% in 2025 to 24% now. So we've seen a big increase in that. Overall, these are huge numbers, and they tell a compelling story about the challenges our employees are facing in today's workplace. So what's the biggest challenge? Well, in 2025, that challenge was IT issues, and that was sitting at 22%. But in 2026, we see that it's cross-organizational collaboration, and that's coming in at 24%. We've seen some progress in quick communication across platforms. It dropped from #2, which was 16%, to 12%, and sitting at #4 currently. But that also illustrates that it's still an ongoing problem that we're looking at. What we're seeing overall, if you will, is that collaboration tools exist, but organizations are really lacking either the culture, the consistency, or sometimes both to use them effectively. This is causing frustration, blocking progress, innovation, and limiting organizational agility. This leads to some big losses for organizations. And we can quantify those losses here, including, as we can see, trust in leadership, employee engagement, overall sense of belonging within the organization, and a sense of productivity. Put bluntly, disconnection is a business risk, and that's illustrated in some of the statistics that we see here. So with that having been said, let's maybe lighten things up a little bit with trend 5, because there is a bright side to this, and that is that consistent communication has transformative benefits to your organization. We've talked at length about the statistics and the real impacts behind some of the problems we've discussed. Now let's turn things around and talk about what happens when employees are consistently informed. These are some great numbers here. 91% of employees are more engaged and motivated. 94% of them feel more confident in their role, and 89%, because largely of that engagement, motivation, confidence, they're more likely to contribute new ideas. So they're benefiting the organization from this, and we can see some great business outcomes emerge. Alan, did you have some thoughts on this? What are your thoughts around some of the improvements or benefits that we can see here?
Yeah, we definitely see similar types of information appearing in the Gallagher report. The way it appears in the Gallagher report talks about taking a genuinely human-centric approach to communications. So we touched on the need for audience segmentation, but the importance of things like the tone of voice that you use, the way that you're speaking to people, the more that you can take that kind of human approach, the more that you can tailor it so that people feel that, they're not just being spoken to by a kind of faceless corporate voice, the more they respond to that. And that's, where you get these figures from. So it's not necessarily just about volume, because we know volume in itself actually contributes to the problem unless it's managed. So you have to be careful about how you're speaking to people and when and where, obviously. But if you get that right, you see a commensurate lift in the effectiveness of all your communications. So we've got the stat, which is an 11% lift in the effectiveness of your whole communications channel mix if you can hit that sweet spot of personalization, human tone of voice, the right format, and so on and so forth. So that's within communicators' control, be they within a comms function or within HR. Yes, there's effort to get there, but the results speak for themselves. If you can achieve that, then you will start to see this type of improvement in employee engagement.
Thanks, Alan. That's a great stat. That 11% uplift is fantastic. And as you pointed out, it is achievable. So it's something that we can mutually work towards to get that across and achieve those uplifts and some of the benefits that we see detailed here on the slide as well. Thank you for that. So some of the improvements that we do see when we start to see some of these these changes rolled out, and we see some of these effectivenesses from the previous slide impacting, we see that higher engagement, 28% say higher engagement is the top outcome. 27% say increased productivity is the top outcome. 24% looking at increased efficiency and leadership trust. 21% see stronger belonging. 20% see improved compliance. Simply put, there's a ton of great benefits to be realized here. And this is going to bring us to another poll. So we're going to jump into that, and I'd like to know, what is your organization's most urgent communication priority for 2026? We have 4 options. A is reaching frontline and deskless workers more effectively. B is unifying our hybrid and in-person digital experience. C is connecting our technology tools into one integrated platform. And finally, option D, proving the ROI of internal communications to leadership. We'll give you just another few seconds to vote on that, and then we're going to jump into the results. Okay, just another 5 seconds here. Wonderful. Okay, wow. This is an interesting one. We have got 100% saying reaching frontline and deskless workers more. So we talked a lot about the idea of some of the problems that are created when we don't reach those folks, some of the disconnects that we see, and it's obviously a very real challenge for the folks on the call today. So thanks very much for your votes on that. Definitely 100% is both surprising and unsurprising. I don't think I expected a complete swing that way, but certainly I expected a very high level of concern. So thanks for illustrating that for us, folks. So of course, we've presented a lot of challenges, and I think one of the things that we want to kind of wrap up here with is some of the steps that we can take to make things easier. And there's a lot of great information on the slide, so we're just going to speak to that here. How can we start solving those disconnections? Number one, look at auditing our channels. We want to map every tool. We want to map our apps, our channels, all the vectors that our employees are using for communications, and identify where those bottlenecks are, identify where updates are getting lost or blocked, and most importantly, where frontline workers are being excluded and they're not seeing the messaging at all. For number two, we want to establish that single source of truth. I've used that term on the call a couple of times today. We want to consolidate our communication strategies into one platform that employees can trust and find everything they need. If they do that, then again, Alan mentioned a little while back, what's the mission? What's the purpose? If we have that source of truth and the purpose is that communication, that helps unify employees under the platform. Number three, and again, a very key point, especially based on our poll results, we want to design for all 3 audiences. So those in-office employees, remote employees, frontline employees. And please note at this point, if your strategy doesn't explicitly serve deskless workers, it's an incomplete strategy, and you really should look at addressing that point. Number 4, we want to use that data. We talked a little bit about that when it came to some of our space utilization, things like that. But looking at things like for communications, for open rates, adoption, space utilization, as I mentioned, let the data expose some of the blind spots, areas where you're not reaching. Let data teach you new lessons. Those aha moments are fantastic when it comes to understanding maybe some of the shortcomings that you have and really carving out a path to address some of those. And then finally, building that foundation for AI. We talked about making sure that some of our strategies are a little bit more complete and cohesive before we lay in that, but certainly that connected, consistent communication, that's the infrastructure that's going to allow us to build a nice AI layer that is going to actually benefit us and ensure that those intelligent tools work. So, as Alan and I both mentioned off the top of the call, the research that we referenced today on multiple occasions was coming from 2 reports. The first you're going to see referenced here, and my colleague is going to drop this into the chat for you folks. So that is the Appspace Workplace Experience and Trends Report. That includes benchmark data from more than 1,000 employees, the AI Success Blueprint, and actionable strategy guides. So we'll give you a second. I assume that's been added to the chat, and you can go ahead and grab that. And then the other report that we referenced, of course, is Gallagher's 2026 Workforce Trends Report. And we've referenced some significant findings here from the Employee Communications Report. So you can download the Gallagher report as well. That's going to be in the chat for you folks. So I'd like to thank you folks for listening today. And always, if you'd like to hear more, well, good news. We're going to be in London at the Gallagher Communications Summit on June 1st and 2nd. We'd love for you to join us to come see live demos, things on how to connect your deskless and hybrid teams. We'd love to meet you and to hear your stories. And hopefully you can join us at this event. It's going to be a lot of fun and very informative. And with that, I think, Alan, we're probably going to cut over to Q&A. So do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. We've got a number of different questions here. First one is from Amanda, excuse me if I've mispronounced your surname, Amanda Micah or Majka. She's asking about digital signage. So she says she works for a large organization, but they only average 5 scans per QR code on their digital signage, and is asking if you have any recommendations for how to increase engagement.
I think it really comes down with that to understanding the channels and where the messaging that we're surfacing on those digital signage. So a lot of studies are showing that folks are just scanning that on just a basic opportunity that they have to, whether they're walking to or from a destination, whatever the case may be. So it really comes down to understanding the messages that are being surfaced on those channels and mixing in some information to make it a little bit more inclusive as far as things go. We've seen that definitely increase that, and certainly just understanding what messages that we're pointing to those channels and what kind of those key times are that we can direct those messages to those folks.
Okay, super, thanks. So we've got a couple of questions here specifically around frontline workers. Now, the first one says that they have over 60% of workers that are not desk-based. They've got limited time outside of doing their jobs. How do we get them to reasonably engage with corporate comms? There's so much that they need to know around, for instance, health and safety. That more kind of corporate messaging tends to be seen as noise. So, where's the kind of sweet spot between the tech and the messaging to help bring that frontline workforce, or at least keep that workforce informed around the important corporate messaging that they need to receive? And maybe just to follow up with that, on the technology side, if companies don't typically allow people to have a smartphone in their workday, and maybe there's constraints or reluctance around shared technology, whether that's tablets or screens, what is available to people, or how could people start to approach reaching that frontline worker set in those circumstances?
Yeah, I think kind of answering the first question, or pardon me, the last question on the availability of whether it's mobile reluctance, whether it's I don't want to use my phone to do corporate work or whatever the case may be. I think it's really creating that entry point. And in some cases, it is the idea of making sure that we have other tools available. For example, those digital signage tools, which we can position in strategic areas so people are seeing those updates. Actually, Amanda's question led into the idea where we have QR codes that can be put up on some of this messaging, and people can scan them. That's creating some of that buy-in. But really, it's giving those folks some skin in the game. I know you mentioned a lot of different things in the first question about the idea of folks needing technological updates, them needing corporate updates, things like that. A lot of that comes back to some of the personalization aspects we've talked about throughout the webinar today, targeted messaging as far as things go, and just understanding, again, that right place, right time idea. We have to take advantage of the opportunities that we have to engage with our employees, whatever those are. So it might come down to the idea of surveying or polling employees to understand, what areas, or what areas of interest they have, what things they need, targeting those channels to make sure those messages hit them at the right time. Look at the strategic work area to see where we can position elements in order to generate that buy-in, or at least those visual glances at some of that information, and really, again, through that targeted messaging, understanding. And this kind of goes back to the idea of a point we made earlier about not everything is important. Using the ability to target audiences and really that understanding of importance to ensure that the messages that are hitting those mobile devices, if they're available, or those digital signage, things like that, are the messages that those folks need in real time. And then, of course, the other part that rolls up with that is the idea of that single source of truth. So if we establish that information can be found in this one area, that's going to help us create buy-in as well. Because one of the biggest challenges, especially with frontline employees, is having that information to hand right away with as few clicks as possible. So it's the idea that if we can put that information in front of them, and we know that this is the source of truth, if you will, not to overuse the point, but if we can get that information in front of them, and our digital workplace, our intranet, is that source of truth, then that's going to create that return business, if you will, because people are going to come back when they find things that number one, benefit them, number two, are easy to find, and number three, of course, are readily available, and that messaging is consistent.
Okay, thank you. Let's change focus a little bit. So coming back to the points that we made around hybrid working and this issue around the ghost office, effectively. There's a significant proportion of people. I think the figure was around 23% who say that they don't know when their colleagues are going to be in. What are the opportunities there with things like desk booking data or room booking data, which can actually help, start to get people together and plan effectively when they're going to be in the same place together?
Great question. I mean, you've kind of already illustrated the point with the desk booking, some of the data there. I mean, if employees can look at an application and straight away can know what desks are being booked, what areas are being booked, things like that, they can strategically plan around where they're going to sit. They can book that desk before they can leave home. They can book their desk with their colleagues, with their teammates, and really first off, the ability to see that who's going to be there, what teams are going to be in, et cetera, really changes this from kind of an ad hoc action to something that's more deliberate. I can plan to sit next with someone I'm going to be collaborating with, things like that. I think number two, some of the data can help us. We talked about it a little bit and kind of some of the benefits, the journey that we might need to go on for designing for collaboration. But that idea of team neighborhoods, we're seeing some offices where they're taking some of that organizational data, understanding who's booking what and when, and they're starting to actually design neighborhoods where people who are working for the same team or are working towards a project or purpose where we're able to book those folks in together. And that, again, is allowing folks to meet their closest collaborators while they're in the office and really giving off something of a more structured approach. And then I think lastly, this is also helping us, and certainly, Alan, we talked about this a little bit as well, but in the long term, this can also help us right-size our space. We have seen organizations that have taken this jump where they're understanding, okay, we've got a hybrid workforce and they're coming in this much. We need X space as opposed to the floor plan we had before. So really understanding, again, going back to the idea maybe neighborhoods or reconfiguring or purpose building rooms, things like that. And it could be also overall a reduction in floor plan if necessary based on these sort of things. So not necessarily that outcome, but at the same time, overall, what we're looking at is a better understanding of who's booking what and when, and being able to target the space and those interactions to make them more beneficial. Once again, avoiding the story that I referred to, which is the idea that I spend an hour on the train getting to the office, and then I spend that hour in Zoom meetings with people who are also there in the office, but we don't have any of that collaboration. So we're starting to get around and eliminate that.
I think the collaboration point is quite interesting there, because that approach doesn't just have an endpoint of greater collaboration amongst the general employee work base. You know, to achieve that, you're going to have your facilities people, you're going to have your HR people, your kind of organizational planners. You know, they're all going to have to work together to come up with, you know, what is that ideal solution in a physical workspace to help achieve, you know, to help colleagues achieve their best work when they do get together and when they meet. So it's got a complex piece that I think it's a very interesting one, and a challenge that's you know, certainly been thrown up by the rapidity with which hybrid working has increased post-COVID.
100%, yes.
Maybe a final question here. We're sort of heading towards the end of our time. Change tack again. Let's talk about AI readiness. So I think the figure you mentioned was something like 87% of employees say, regarding that they need a connected in their view, sorry, a connected workplace is a vital part if AI is going to work. So, you know, does that mean that people should, you know, not proceed with their AI rollout or their AI programs until basic comms elements are fixed? What's your thinking around that?
I don't think in that case it's so much stop your roll as slow your roll. So it's the idea that if we're looking at rolling out AI, we did make the point earlier that you know, AI can't sit on top of a broken structure. It's simply going to really exacerbate some of the challenges that we're already having. But if we understand kind of what those communication challenges are, we can gradually roll in AI while we're also addressing and fixing those problems. So it's really kind of looking at the idea of understanding what our communication strategies are, understanding what those gaps are, and where we maybe don't have gaps or we think that we've got we've got some cohesion, we can start to roll AI in with some of those processes. But overall, it has to be kind of a methodical understanding of where some of the gaps lie and how we can take steps to maximize those efficiencies to really bridge those gaps while continuing to roll AI in on top. So it's not a full stop, but it really benefits kind of a more cohesive understanding across the organization of where we have some of those gaps and what we can do to address them as we're rolling in AI to greater benefit.
And I think we see from the Gallagher report, one of the key outcomes of that this year is the change communication impact, particularly when we're looking at things like AI rollout and AI adoption. We know that just putting another tool in is not going to work. It doesn't matter if it's AI or anything else. The principles are the same. So while there's maybe a push at a senior level to proceed with an AI program, an AI rollout, communications has a clear role to play in supporting that, whether that's through enablement initiatives or whether that's through making sure that the change communications that are happening in relation to the rollout are very effective. So I think you're right. I think that if the basics aren't in place, then there maybe needs to just be a little bit of a reining in to make sure that the messages are going to the right people at the right time, as we've talked about before. It's all intermingled in some respects. But I think there is a pressure and an expectation on AI having an impact, but it's only going to do that if employees have the right information provided to them, the use cases, the justification, the safeguards, and all the rest of it. So, an interesting time for communications, but one which brings comms functions and potentially HR as well to the fore in terms of really helping organizations be ready to capitalize on their AI initiatives.
100%. Yeah, no, a very great point about the idea of just, communicating those changes. And we made that earlier in the presentation as well, understanding the why that we're bringing some of these tools in and how it's going to help, what the benefits are that we're going to receive, things like that. So yeah, fantastic point on that, Alan. Thank you.
No problem at all. I think just as we finish up here, there's some comments about the links to the reports. I think my understanding is that the reports are in the resource link boxes on the side of the screen. So if you head there, then you should be able to find the links that you require. Any closing thoughts from yourself, Brad, before we thank everyone and let them get about their day?
No, honestly, I really enjoyed the process that went into preparing this today. Certainly, I loved hearing some of the questions from our audience. I mean, it really, I think as we've established, Alan, it really is a journey, and it really does involve the entire organization, whether it's something that we're looking at how to improve our space utilization, or whether we're looking at how we address the corporate comms gaps that we're seeing, things like that. It really is a journey. It involves putting the right tech in the right place. It involves putting the right messaging in the right channels, personalization being huge aspects, things like that. Certainly I could go on and reiterate, but undertaking that journey is kind of the first step that we need in order to start resolving some of these issues that we're seeing. So I've really enjoyed the discussion today and the collaboration with you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you everybody for joining the session today. I hope you found it insightful and useful. Thanks for your contributions to the polls and the questions that were submitted. Please do look out the respective reports. There's some really interesting insight for HR and comms coming out of those, and for senior leaders as well, I might add. So thanks again for your time, and we'll finish there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, folks.